Separate your head from your shoulders.
Do it fast.
All right.
The time's roll. No. You might as well just kill me then, too.
Caleb Colton no longer belongs to our world.
We'll give him a week and see if we can call him one of us.
He belongs to hers.
But you have to learn to kill.
He belongs to theirs.
I want to kill.
He makes you kill tonight.
And they all belong to the night.
Hey guys, welcome to Movie Matters. I'm Kevin.
I'm Jake.
And today we're talking about the 1987 horror film Near Dark. First time seeing it, I really enjoyed it, and I kind of got the feeling that you didn't, Jake.
I fucking hated this movie.
Interesting. Okay. We're on the divisive tour lately. Like, we both have contrasting opinions, which I like. It offers good discourse, but yeah, let's get into it a bit. I mean, this movie is directed by Catherine Bigelow, who more famously is known for The Hurt Locker of recent times. She's the first female director to win an Oscar for Best Director. She also made one of a really awesome '90s movie, Point Break. Have you ever seen Point Break?
I have not, but I know what it is.
Yeah, it's awesome. Not to be confused with the shitty remake. Yeah, she's a good director. She used to be married to James Cameron, which you can see his DNA kind of all over this movie. Let's start with what you didn't like.
How much time we got?
Yeah, which is probably everything, it sounds like.
I hated the acting. The acting was terrible. Like, literally every single person either can't act at all or overacted. Like, I'm looking at Bill Paxton for overacting. Cause
I thought he was awesome.
I thought he was terrible. I think the one thing for me that actually, like, in my opinion, this movie is another instance of great concept, failed execution, which we talked about with Scanners a little bit.
Yeah.
I really like the idea of, this kid getting roped into a vampire gang and being reluctant to, go all the way with, what they're demanding of him and, trying to get out. Like, I think it's a great concept for a vampire movie. I feel like this movie wasn't scary enough. It wasn't, my biggest problem with it is the way it was structured is just not, like, I just didn't feel like it was very compelling. And it kind of left the end really rushed. And, like, I'll explain more as we go through, but, like, it felt like this movie's, an hour and 40 minutes or something like that.
Yeah, not even. It's like an hour 34.
Yeah, like, I feel like an hour of this movie is, like, should have been, like, maybe 20 minutes to a half hour. And there should have been a lot more interesting content in between him becoming a vampire and the final, like, showdown. Like, I feel like they stretched the shit out of him just doing vampire shit. Like, and it just didn't, like, I don't know, it didn't, like, play well for me. I don't, like, as much as I want to see them, murder, like, 12 people in a bar, like, over and over again, it's like, okay, like, we get it. Like, he doesn't want to kill people.
Yeah.
How many times do we need to see them carjacking and murdering people and then kill a bar full of people and then have a shootout with police? And then it's like, yeah, we get it. Like,
yeah,
they're hooligan vampires that like to kill people, like I feel like there's just not enough like
Meat
there
on the
needed to be
bone.
something else to make like this like more impactful or something. I don't know.
I get where you're coming from on that.
Like and like the his dad and his sister like just randomly at the same motel, and they just like shoehorn that in to like start the like final conflict. It's like
I liked that. I thought it was cool.
I thought it's a fine way to like kick off that like end sequence, but again, like everyone's acting just sucks, and like they're like in this room full of vampires, and the dad's like, "What are you doing? Who are these people?" It's like, okay, like, you know, he's like they're all like fucking like grungy and shit, and like I would be far more concerned. There's guns everywhere in the room, and like he's just like, "Who are these people? Like, what's going on?"
Yeah.
It's like, okay.
I get your concerns. I loved it. I thought it was really entertaining. I mean, it's not something I'm like gonna rate 5 out of 5 stars. You know, it's like a 3.5 out of 5 for me. But like, I agree with you that. I mean, I even texted you this. I was like, the screenplay in the beginning, like the dialogue was like fucking weird and stupid and just like goofy. It was like so forced. And the acting in the beginning, I was like, what the hell am I getting myself into this with this movie? I'm like, I'm probably not going to like this based on this cheesy ass, weird, like very scripted dialogue. Especially with, you know, Caleb and May, and they're like him trying to court her in, you know, this Western type of way. And that's what this movie is. Basically, it's a Western disguised as a horror vampire movie, which I think is really cool.
Yeah, like exactly. Like the setting is very interesting. It's like rural Oklahoma,
Which it's not.
which yeah, it's really not. But
Because Oklahoma doesn't. I don't even think Oklahoma has mountains. Does Oklahoma have mountains?
I don't think so.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure
Yeah,
it's
I don't
flat.
think so.
I'm googling.
But yeah,
this.
this like the
Oh,
concept.
Oklahoma
is-
does have mountains. 4 mountain ranges: Arbuckle Mountain Range, Wichita Mountains, and Ozark Mountains, and Wichita.
okay.
Interesting. Okay. They're
yeah,
not
I
very
mean,
big, but
It is an interesting premise. It's an interesting setting. It's an interesting way to take the vampire myth and change it and do something different with it.
yes, agreed.
Which I do appreciate the movie for, in my opinion, trying to do that. I just don't feel like it was done well. Like I won't keep just like harping on it, but
Yeah.
you know, I the soundtrack is great.
Tangerine Dream, dude.
Yeah,
very
really
80s.
really good. I don't think it always fits with what's going on in the movie, but it's really well done.
I feel like that's a very 80s trope, though, too. Like how we've talked
Yeah.
about these movies ending with a rock ballad after just like mowing down all these people.
Yeah.
But yeah, I agree. But the soundtrack is super dope. Yeah, I mean this movie was. It was definitely in a trope of vampire movies. Like in the 80s, there was a big resurgence in American cinema with vampire movies like Fright Night, Once Bitten Vamp, The Lost Boys was very, very popular. The Monster Squad, which is an awesome movie and very underrated. But this originally Catherine Bigelow wanted to just make an all-out Western. And those movies couldn't really get financed at this time. And, you know, most Westerns, I like Western movies, like, you know,
Same.
cowboy movies. I love those. I wanted to be a cowboy as a kid. Like, I had my whole room. I don't know if you remember my room in
wanna
middle
be a
school.
cowboy.
Yeah. My room in middle school, I had cowboy sheets and,
Yeah.
like, spurs on the wall. And, like, you know, Indiana Jones is not a cowboy, but I had Indiana Jones on there. and I had a tombstone wooden like board that's a Tombstone Sheriff's Office in my room. Like I was obsessed with cowboy stuff and westerns. But like a lot of people think westerns are kind of boring, and again, that's kind of why I feel like they're not very marketable in cinema. There are some amazing westerns, especially in like the spaghetti westerns, and
the
like
Good, the Bad, and the Ugly is
exactly.
probably my number 1 or number 2 favorite movie of all time.
Yeah,
so
it's super good. But that's when they're like, oh, like let's just jump on this bandwagon of vampire movies and let's disguise it, with that. And I think that's super cool and super smart. It's also Catherine Bigelow's directorial debut, and I think she did an awesome job. Especially the effects, the blood, like the gore, the flames, like I think she
all
did
of
an
that
awesome
is
job.
done very well.
Yeah, like when
all
Caleb,
the practical effects are very, very well done.
Yeah, so sick.
And I will say the shootout scene with the cops is actually very well done.
It's awesome.
I think you do get to see those touches of James Cameron, particularly in that sequence. There's lots of vibes of like the shootout with like in Terminator 2 with like what's the name of the company when Arnold has like the minigun and he's like just like
Cyberdyne?
Cyberdyne.
Yeah.
Those kinds of things are definitely in there. Like even,
he definitely has
the way
his
the
fingerprints.
camera is like positioned and things like you kind of see that.
And what's cool is like this cast is straight out of Aliens, which James Cameron made in '86. You've got Lance Henriksen who plays Jesse in this. You've got Jeanette Goldstein who plays Diamondback in this, who's one of the soldiers in Aliens. Henriksen is Bishop in Aliens, the android. Also, Jeanette Goldstein's in Terminator 2. She plays John Connor's stepmother, or like foster mother, excuse me, not stepmother. And then you've got obviously Bill Paxton, who is in Aliens, and he's in a lot of James Cameron's movies like True Lies, and he plays a punk in Terminator, the first one. So again, it's kind of like what we've talked about in our other reviews of like I like to say 6 Degrees of Kevin Bacon, even though it's not, but it's like it's 6 Degrees of 80s movies where you have all these awesome actors that are like, oh, I've seen that guy, and oh, I know that guy or girl, or so on and so forth. I liked Bill Paxton's acting in this. I liked Lance Henriksen's acting in this. I didn't like Caleb, who is I don't know his name, Adrian Pasdar. I don't like his acting that much. He's okay. He's not bad. May is not great.
Yeah.
But it's very 80s, this movie, and that's what I like about it, because it just fits our mold. In my opinion, it fits my criteria of an 80s movie for the most part. Like, it's fun. The effects are sick. It's practical. It's different, and it's, I say this with certain movies that we've watched. It's a cult classic. My girlfriend gives me a lot of flack on that one, but because I say it all the time. But this movie is literally a cult movie.
And like the 80s is like the period
Treasure
of
trove
cult
of
classics.
That. Yeah. I mean, this movie made no money at the box office. It made like $3 million on a $5 million budget. Apparently, it wasn't marketed very well, or very. When I say that, like they just didn't advertise it very often. It was released 2 weeks after The Lost Boys. The Lost Boys was a big box office hit. Mm-hmm. It was also the last movie produced and released by DEG, which is De Laurentiis Entertainment Group, and that studio went bankrupt. So as a result, the film didn't receive a ton of publicity during its release, and they credit that to its box office failure. But yeah, I mean, this is definitely the definition of a cult following movie. I asked my boss at work if he's seen it. He's like, oh yeah. He's like, I fucking love that movie. So I think it's a pretty well liked movie. With besides you.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's unusual for a vampire movie because the word vampire is never spoken in it, and the mythology of vampires is not really ever like disgust in this. There's
no
no
one,
silver
no
bullet.
one seems to understand that vampires exist either.
Yeah.
Which is like one of those things for me. I don't like when movies do that with like things like vampires or werewolves or like whatever. When it's like people are like well, like if you're putting a movie in a modern context and no one knows what a vampire is, it's dumb. Like it's like, in my opinion, it's bad writing because you didn't want to have to deal with the fact that the characters know what vampires are. So you just like, no one knows. And then, oh, now we can do all these like things to make it a little bit easier for ourselves to like write, what.
But I like
happening.
that. I like that, and especially in this movie because it's different. It's different than all the other movies, and there's no garlic. There's no. If you look in a mirror, the only thing they have, or like the water, the only thing they have is the sunlight. That's the only thing, and I like that. That is so well, like that device is so well used in this movie, and it's so cool. And like I said, and you said this too, the practical effects, like when Caleb gets bitten by May and he's trying to get home and it's like sunlight out. I had no idea what was happening. And I was like, why is his jacket all smoking and stuff? And like all this smoke was coming from him. I'm like, God, that's such a cool effect. Mm-hmm. And then you realize it later. And I love that. I mean,
one of the coolest sunlight effects is when one of the cops, I think, shoots a hole in the door and Bill Paxton gets like sunbeam right in the stomach and like lights on fire. That was really cool.
Yeah, very, very cool. But as far as like, the plot goes, and like you said, there's like a lot of exposition and like 20 minutes could have been taken out. It's like they go from one kill to the next. I don't know. Like, I liked.
It's not that like. Not like I didn't. I don't. I'm trying to think of the best way to. Like, I just feel like something was lacking in this movie. Like I wanted to either see it be more frightening, or that they delve more into the characters and really develop them more. I feel like that was just missing. Like, we don't get backstory on anyone except May a little bit.
You get a little bit on Jesse, kind of, where they're like, he's a Confederate. He used to be a Confederate soldier and fought for the South, which was cool.
Which is really just a punchline to a bad joke, which was like, okay, like, I mean, it's fine, like, kind of a cool like tidbit about his character, but like that could have been like a whole thing that they could have weaved in as a subplot to like make it more interesting, make him more interesting. I mean, I don't know.
I get it. I like the lack of backstory on the characters because then it just leaves more mystery.
Yeah, like I would have been fine if we didn't know anything about them.
Yeah.
Like, I kept waiting for that moment where, like, in the Lost Boys, you get the fangs and the, like, there's, like, a transformation,
Yeah.
But, like, we don't even get fangs in this, which is, like, a little weird. And, like, the bite on Caleb is, like, not a, like, 2-point bite. It's, like, a little... It's almost like she just ripped his skin off in like one point, which is kind of weird. Like, I don't know. They weren't like as menacing as as I think they should have been. And like, again, like I felt like this movie was almost more of like a romance than a horror movie. Which is like fine. Like, I would have been okay if that was the case. I just feel like it didn't pick a lane well enough.
Yeah, I could understand that. I like when we have contrasting opinions. I like it. It's fun. I'm curious to see how we'll do on the next one since we'll be doing it in person. And we'll get into that at the end of the episode. But no, I mean, like, Lance, like Lance Henriksen, I read about him and how he prepared for his role and like background. Apparently he came up with his own origin story about the whole Confederate Navy thing, and that's when he became a vampire. But like, again, it's like, how did he become, like, who bit him? You know what I mean? Where's that person?
Yeah.
There is some things that I would like explained more, but again, it's like, do we really need that? Maybe not. But like, you know, excuse me, Henriksen painted his hair black with tar, since was like an actual thing that like the Navy Confederate seamen did in the 1800s, which is cool. He added broken fake nails to make his finger look like the extension of his finger bones, and he went to town. Like he went to like town in character, and like he drove across the country to get to Arizona, which is where it's filmed, which is super dope. And I love that because I live in Arizona, and it was cool because I was like, oh man, this looks really familiar. And I looked it up and I was like, oh, this is Arizona. But yeah, apparently he drove from, I don't know exactly where he was, but cross country to get to Arizona to film this, and like picked up hitchhikers along the way. And like at one time, like he even picked up one hitchhiker, and the hitchhiker was like 3 times his size, like a huge jack dude. And he managed to scare the shit out of him. And like, because he was just trying to like be his character, which is super cool. And he also knew that like this guy that's 3 times the size of him would beat the fuck out of him. And like at the end of it, he just was like, hey, I'm just literally doing this for a role, and gave the guy $80, which is super cool. Yeah, like, you know, there's I read trivia that like he even like in boredom between takes, he would, because of like they were in the desert, he would just take drives to kind of, you know, get in character even more. Apparently he went on a drive with Bill Paxton one time, and they were stopped by policemen who like were so like weirded out by them because they were stopping him for speeding, that the cop like stepped back and like literally put his hand on his pistol, like didn't know what the fuck was going to happen. And then he eventually decided to send them on the way because he didn't know what the hell to do with them, which is super cool and very in character for them. And like, yeah, there's a lot of cool stuff. Like even Bill Paxton in full makeup and half his face missing, which he gets like, he's on the poster for this movie, at least on IMDb, where he just keeps getting deteriorated throughout the movie, which is super cool. And I like that. And he saw like a train worker that this train kept interrupting filming, excuse me. And he went up to one of the workers and he's like, hey man, there's been an accident. And he's like all bloody and cut up and everything. And like, he's like, and if you think I'm bad, you should see the other guy, which is super cool. I like fun stuff like that. You know, like for example, there's, you know, Colin Farrell dressed as the Penguin from the new Batman movie, like went to like some New York restaurant and like was like an asshole and in character, which was super cool. Like I love stuff like that. That's really cool. And it just like gives weight to your character and like helps your performance, I feel like.
Mm-hmm.
So that, again, I liked it. I mean, my favorite part is there's so many good little set pieces. Like I like the bar scene. The fights, like all that is cool. Like where he asks the waitress for a glass and he slits her throat, and then she like bends over and she's like filling the glass with blood, which is super cool. And then, you know, the bartender shoots Caleb, and like all the blood squibs are really cool, and it's like very violent. Like I was impressed with the level of violence and like detail in the gore, which is, you know, on par for an 80s horror movie, if you ask me.
Yeah.
And like, I don't know if you caught this, but the one bar patron who is like the first guy who's like with the shot of whiskey that...
with the long hair and the hat?
Yeah. Do you know what movie he's in?
No.
He's the same bar patron in Terminator 2 that puts the cigar out on Arnold.
Nice.
Yeah, again, like little things. I like those connections. And again, it's James Cameron's DNA all over this movie. So, I like like you said, the shootout scene's super cool. I like the truck driving scene at the end where, he's trying to blow up the truck. Bill Paxton's like pulling the truck apart and like, rips open the engine, which was cool. And then the ending where, they're trying to chase after him. Like Jesse and Diamondback are going after Caleb and May and they're catching on fire. Like, that's super cool. The blood transfusion thing was a little iffy for me, but it was cool. That was
lame.
It was like very quick and very unrealistic.
Yeah.
But cool. But I did like the family dynamic to it. I mean, you don't, like you said, if they would have developed the characters a little bit more, showing that he is like a family man and like family's very important and stuff like that, I think that would have added layers to the situation. But I like that, the little kid's trying to take his sister, which is cool. And then, the dad's the one that does the transfusion. But I feel like the only way he knows how to do the transfusion is there that little scene in the very beginning where he's like doing something to this like sheep or something in the beginning. It's like,
yeah, it's supposed like to unbelievably briefly mentioned that he's like a veterinarian or something for like farm animals.
Yeah. Okay.
Like that's the only clue. So like, yeah, I feel like it just clicked for me a little bit that I think the movie jumps too quickly into the realm of the vampire thing.
Yeah.
Because like the first scene is him talking to May, and it just escalates into, the vampire stuff.
Like, oh, I gotta get home before dawn.
Like I feel like we needed like 10 or 15 minutes of like who is Caleb and like what's going on in his life, kind of thing.
I agree.
To make you care a little bit more.
Yes.
And then I feel like maybe I'd feel a little bit better about everything else. But yeah, I mean, like. It maybe like it just needs to like the pacing just needed to be shifted a little bit, and maybe I'd be okay. Like
it went by quick for me. I mean, a brisk 90 minutes. I mean, again, that's very 80s. It's more showings in the theater.
Yeah,
but yeah, I agree. It could have been fleshed out. No pun intended. A little bit better.
Yeah, I mean, I just feel like certain parts of it were too long and others were too short, and like. If they would have adjusted those a little bit better, it might have added some of the things that I felt like were missing.
I could agree. With that for sure. Still loved it, though. I'm not changing my opinion.
Yeah. Well, I do like it whenever we disagree, because you do always make good points. I'm like, okay, maybe it's not as bad as I originally felt. I will admit a major problem for me was that I had to watch this with commercials and it sucked.
Oh, yeah, I had to too. On like Pluto TV is what I watched it on. Which was fine. Oh, it just makes it feel longer though.
Well, it makes it feel longer.
It breaks
I'm already
it up.
like by the 30, 45 minute mark, I'm like, I'm not liking this already. I got to watch another fucking commercial.
Yeah, I get that.
Like it's, it can take a toll sometimes on, my experience with the movie. But like, I tried to keep that out of my head as much as possible and really pay attention when, the actual movie was on. And like, I mean, we talked about this on. There's another movie that I didn't like that much a while ago now that I had to watch with commercials, and I was like,
"Yeah."
You made the point. You're like, I bet if you watched it without commercials, it'd be better. And I watched it really late at night.
Yes. So we've talked about this before too. It's like your experience. And your factors around you will contribute whether you like the movie or not. Sometimes if you're texting during a movie, if there's commercials, if it's late at night, if you had a shitty day at work, so on and so forth. There's a ton of contributing factors that can affect your feelings or rating of the movie. I watched this movie right after work, and the commercials didn't bother me too much. At this day and age where we don't like commercials, no one does for the most part. But I totally get that. This movie, in 2006, it was announced that it was going to be remade, which this movie, like I said, with like our last review with Scanners, I think Scanners should be remade. Again, I've talked about it a handful of times with, all these Hollywood running out of, original ideas, but I think Scanners would be awesome remade. This movie, I think, would be pretty cool remade too. But the movie got delayed a little bit, and then 2008 came around, and that's when Twilight came out. And everyone went crazy for Twilight and ruined everything. So literally. So I doubt that it's going to get remade again because it's been canceled. But I think this movie could be remade for sure.
I think this one deserves a second chance. Like I said, the premise of this movie is great.
Yeah.
I think leaning into the Western aspect a bit more would help it as well.
Maybe even
making it a period piece.
Yeah, exactly.
Would be really cool. I know, I'm going to geek out for a minute, but there's a comic book called American Vampire, which is a vampire Western.
That's cool.
That moves through all the decades as this vampire kind of lives her life, and then her kind of enemy but kind of friend vampire that turned her is this he starts out as this gunslinging outlaw, and then they both kind of move through the decades together and encounter each other in these different situations in California. It's a really cool comic series if anybody's looking for something like that, but that's a very, I think, compelling kind of, the Old West is a very compelling time period, and then you throw something cool in like vampires, and you get very interesting things that can happen.
Yeah, again, I like the mixing of genres. That could make a cool TV show. I feel like you have a TV show set in one particular decade, or time frame, say, the 1800s. It starts in the 1800s for one season, and it's all about this, setup, and then you get to the 1900s in the next, the frontier land or something you know what I mean? Something like that. That'd be a cool TV show, in my opinion, because then you could really, again, flesh out, no pun intended, the characters. I think this movie should be remade, and I really enjoyed it. I'm glad we watched it because I went into this movie knowing nothing about it. I went in completely blind, pretty much, which I liked.
I did know it was a vampire movie, but that was about it.
Yeah, I totally forgot what it was, and then I kind of was like I looked at it when I was watching, and I was like, oh yeah, it's a vampire movie. And then we've got Altered States next, which I will be in Chicago for. Jake and I are going to be watching it together. Our first movie on the podcast that we'll watch together, which will be fun, 80s wise. So I'm looking forward to that. And then we'll be doing our next podcast together in person, which will be fun. And we'll see if we have conflicting thoughts on that one as well.
Yeah.
Because it'll be fun to argue in person.
Yeah. I think the only other thing I want to say about this movie is that I went into this with pretty high level of excitement. Because I had heard that this movie was great. So yeah, maybe I overhyped it too. I don't know, but
that happens.
Yeah. I don't know. Someday when I can watch it without commercials, I'll give it another shot, maybe. But yeah.
Yeah, it's on Blu-ray, but it's expensive. I think it's it's $30 used, which is kind of high.
Yeah.
But yeah. So yeah, it's for those people that are going to watch it. Hopefully you watch it without commercials, and that will help you like it, make you like it better. If not, sorry, and you'll be on Jake's side.
Yeah.
Yeah, hope you guys enjoyed this one, and we'll catch you next week with Jake and I in person together.
Yep.
Thanks for listening.
See ya.